Hey everybody, in this video, we're going to talk about something that comes up really quite often for people who are moving from a smaller city to Indianapolis or a much bigger city than Indianapolis. And when they get here, they want to know, of course, for their day-to-day, what the traffic is going to be like in Indianapolis. So we're going to talk about that in general, what the traffic's like in Indianapolis in this video. So stay tuned. Hey everybody, I'm Jason Compton with the Compton Home Group. Welcome back to the channel. If it's your first time to the channel and you want to know everything there is to know about living in Indianapolis or any of the surrounding suburbs, then make sure you hit the subscribe button and tap the little bell so you're notified every time we do a new video each and every week. Now we have people reaching out to us from all over the country, from really small cities, small towns, and really big cities across the country too. And they want to know things about Indianapolis that they just really can't find very easily online, like what the traffic is truly like here. And then, of course, any other question that you actually have about Indianapolis itself or the suburbs. So if you have questions at all, then make sure that you reach out any way that you know how. We'll always have your back with those questions, and we'll certainly have your back when it comes time for you to make your move to Indianapolis. So again, in this video, we're going to talk about traffic in general in Indianapolis. And I have to admit, I've not lived, of course, in Indianapolis my entire life. I've said before that I've moved here in 1997, and where I'm from is a city in southern Indiana called Evansville. And it's not a small city. It's roughly 115 to 120,000 people or so, somewhere in that range. So it has enough people and enough traffic, of course, to have some traffic. Here you can get some traffic jams, you can have morning rush hour, you can have evening rush hour, and certainly some places in the city where it's stickier or heavier than some other places. And it's also large enough to know where those things are and kind of how to sometimes avoid those traffic areas, the really highly congested areas. But when I moved from Evansville to Indianapolis in 1997, and this was kind of after my college days, but landed here, knew it was a much bigger city than Evansville was. Indianapolis itself is close to 900,000 people, and then when you include all the surrounding metro, it's close to 2 million people. So you're probably going to get some more congestion here and there. And I didn't know exactly how congested it would actually be. And I found out, along with a lot of other people too who've lived here a long time, that there are some big spots, some hot spots that you really want to try to avoid in the morning and also the afternoon in the evening rush hour, because they are absolutely, sometimes can be horrendous, but certainly heavy, no question about that. Now when you're talking about traffic, there are some stats to really keep in mind that actually can make some things pretty interesting. Because I do know that a lot of people moving from a really big city like Los Angeles or New York or Miami, where it's very, very concentrated with people and the traffic is notorious for being pretty much bad kind of almost all day long, but especially during the morning rush hour and the evening rush hour. When they figure out what the traffic is like in Indianapolis, they think it's just not that bad to them. But if you're coming from a really small town and you're looking at moving to Indianapolis, then I can definitely see, hey, is it going to be bad? I mean, what should I expect all day long, but especially when I'm going to work in the morning or when I'm coming home in the evening? And depending on where you live, how bad is that going to be compared to some other places? So some stats to keep in mind just about Indianapolis to put some of this stuff in perspective. So Indianapolis is a bigger city in the country, and as far as the geographic area, how big the city is geographically, how much space it takes up, it ranks about 16th. And really some of the biggest cities in the country are very concentrated. There are, of course, some big cities that are very spread out and congested and have a lot of people in them. But Indianapolis is relatively spread out. And when you look at some of the other cities that are geographically large, they actually aren't incredibly populated. They aren't, at least a lot of them aren't the most populated cities in the entire country. So Indianapolis, geographically spread out. And then when you look at its population, it ranks about 17th just in Indianapolis in general. So if you've basically got an Indianapolis address, then you're included in Indianapolis. and ranks about 17th in the country. But as far as the metro area is concerned, so if you include all of the areas surrounding Indianapolis, like all of the suburbs, then it ranks about 33rd in the country. But interestingly, if you look at some statistics with traffic, and there's a site called TomTom.com, and if you guys all remember before cell phones and GPS built into your car and all that, TomTom was a unit that you could put in your car. It was a GPS unit and help with maps, help with directions. But it's still around, they still do that kind of thing, but their website, TomTom.com, is incredible for traffic statistics, not just in the United States, but actually across the entire world. So if you look at the ranking in there for Indianapolis, we rank 172nd currently. You can go back and it can change in years past, but currently in the United States, 172nd as far as how bad the traffic is compared to all other cities across the country. Now, not surprisingly, when you look at the top 5, Los Angeles ranks number 1, and then you've got Miami in there, you've got New York in there, you've got San Francisco in there. A lot of cities that just aren't all that surprising as far as how rough their traffic is and how congested everything is. But it's pretty amazing that Indianapolis ranks so incredibly low as far as its traffic is concerned. So when you get into those statistics a little bit, just to give you an idea for Indianapolis as to what rush hour looks like, being ranked 172nd in the entire country, it's pretty promising. Now, I have to admit, there are a lot of times where I don't want to be on the road at all. I don't want to be driving at between 5 and 6, but sometimes I have to be. And then in the morning, you're always going to have a little extra traffic where people are going to work and moving around quite a bit, just trying to get to where they need to be. But it might just be congested. So how much time does it really add to your commute? And it is interesting to look at these statistics and keep things in perspective. So if you look in the morning, the time lost for a roughly 30-minute trip going in that morning rush hour is only about 3 minutes. So it adds an extra 3 minutes on average to your roughly 30-minute commute. Now, of course, a lot of people won't have a 30-minute commute. They'll have a 10 or a 5 or a 15 or a 20. So then that time is going to be reduced. It's going to be even smaller. Now, if you look in the evening, during the evening rush hour, we're talking about 6 minutes added to a roughly 30-minute drive on average. That's, of course, more than it is in the morning, but it's not a tremendous amount. So let's take that and compare it to Los Angeles. So how much time for an average 30-minute drive in the morning are you going to lose or have to expect to be this much longer in Los Angeles for that morning rush hour? You're talking about 11 minutes in the morning. So roughly 30-minute drive is going to be 11 minutes longer when you're in that morning rush hour traffic. Now for the evening, it's an additional, on average, 16 minutes. So when you compare it to Indianapolis, 3 minutes extra in the morning, 6 minutes extra in the evening, to that Los Angeles 11 minutes in the morning and then 16 in the evening, it doesn't sound like all that big a deal, but when you add that up over the course of the entire year for Indianapolis, the extra 3 in the morning, the extra 6 in the evening, it adds up to about 36 hours or 1 day and 12 hours of extra time that you're spending in your car. That sounds horrible, just sitting in traffic that little bit in the morning and a little bit in the evening. But if you compare that to Los Angeles, you're talking about a little over 100 hours, about 101 hours or 4 days and 5 hours. So that is a big, big difference. And that can help kind of put in perspective, what does that 172 ranking actually mean for Indianapolis? And the overarching meaning here is that the traffic in Indianapolis, no matter how much people here complain about it, it just pales in comparison to some places with some real traffic and some places where you're going to be spending some real time in your car. And these are just averages too. You can have days that are better, but you can also have days that are certainly worse. Indianapolis, we definitely have days that are worse. You might have a couple of accidents. You could have some bad weather. In Indianapolis compared to a place like Los Angeles or Miami, that's going to happen. You can have rain in Los Angeles or Miami, but here you can have snow and ice, and that'll almost always contribute to more time in the car and a longer commute for those days. But usually we know those things are coming ahead of time, and we can try our best to work around them as much as possible. Sometimes it's not possible to do, and you just have to go and gut it out. You just have to leave earlier and expect your commute to be longer. But on average, Indianapolis, it's just not that bad for traffic. Now, I will say that there are some hot spots in Indianapolis, some places that, you might not be able to avoid, but if you can, try to avoid them. But they've gotten better over the years. So when I moved here in 1997, these places were really pretty brutal, but the infrastructure has improved dramatically, essentially over the past 20 years, and especially in these particular spots, that the traffic, while it can get heavy, it really never, I shouldn't say never, but it doesn't very often just slow to the point where you're crawling or not moving at all. But if you look, let's just say on the south side, between the I-465 and the I-65 interchange, that used to be just a really, really rough area, and traffic would always back up with people getting onto 465 or getting off of it onto I-65, either going into Indianapolis to the north or south down to Greenwood. But it has since improved so much, and while traffic can get heavy through there, it usually flows pretty well. You just got to pay attention to what you're doing, of course. You get over onto the north side, and one of the most notorious areas for traffic is the northeast side, right around where I-465 and I-69 meet. I-69 goes north up into Fishers and Noblesville, and it's a place that, since it's grown so much since the late 90s, traffic is just flowing out through there, and once you branched off of I-69 and got on US 37 to get deeper into Fishers and Noblesville, it just couldn't handle it. There just wasn't enough road there to handle all that traffic. But I-69 has been widened. US 37 is undergoing some incredible changes even as we speak right now, where all the stoplights are being removed, and US 37 will go under all the cross streets, and the cross streets all have roundabouts to get across US 37. So the traffic flows through there really, really well right now, and it's only going to get better. But again, people watching this video here in Indianapolis are going to say you're wrong. It's a horrible area, and yeah, when you compare it to some of the other areas in the city, it is still congested, but it moves so much better than what it used to move. Plus, they put a new exit at 106th Street, which relieved a lot of the traffic up at 116th and I-69, and that's where the Topgolf and IKEA are located, in downtown Fishers, which is already a really congested area. And so people trying to get off there, off of I-69, made it worse. So putting them at 106th Street or 96th Street, being able to get off on those exits, relieves some of that congestion for sure. And then if you get over onto the far north side, US 31 and also Keystone Parkway, those have improved so much over the years. For the most part, once you get off of I-465, all the stoplights going north have been removed. So they're all either underpasses going north, and you have roundabouts for the cross streets going across the top, so you never have traffic that has to stop going one direction compared to the other. And they're also much wider than what they used to be too. So the traffic just flows so much better, and they can accommodate the growth of those particular areas so much better now and off into the future. So I don't think the traffic in Indianapolis is really a huge concern for anybody moving here, unless you're just not used to a lot of cars on the road at all. If you're from a town out in the middle of nowhere, not really close to any big cities, and you're used to 5,000 or 10,000 or maybe 50,000 people living there, then you're gonna be dramatically changed by your traffic in Indianapolis. But coming from a place that's of reasonable size, like Indianapolis, or even a little bit smaller than Indianapolis, like a place where I came from in Evansville, which is a little over 100,000 people. Coming to Indianapolis, I don't think you're gonna be completely shell-shocked, and you'll be quite relieved for the most part when you're coming from a place like Los Angeles or Miami or New York or Seattle or San Francisco that are highly congested. Now, if you have any other questions about the traffic in Indianapolis, or where you plan on living in Indianapolis and what the traffic would be like there and what your commute would be like, certainly reach out any way that you know how. And until the next one, we'll see you later.